They laughed at the lunch lady until she became the new CEO overnight. It was a busy morning at Sterling Foods Corporation headquarters in New York City. The sound of footsteps echoed across the marble floor, phones kept ringing, and gray suits passed each other like a cold, rushing storm. Amid that hurried crowd, a middle-aged black woman stood quietly behind the cafeteria counter, wearing gloves and arranging trays of food. Her name was Martha Johnson. She was 52 years old. No one paid attention to her. To them, she was just the kitchen lady, the woman who serves morning coffee. A young employee whispered as Martha walked by, "She cooks well, but I bet she could not even understand a single financial figure." Soft chuckles followed, blending with the smell of baked pastries and the clinking of spoons against trays. Martha said nothing. She only smiled, a faint, almost invisible smile. Yet in her eyes, there was something else: calmness, depth, and a quiet sharpness. While others saw her as a simple cook, she was observing the entire system, from supply invoices and stockholder lists to the comings and goings of every executive. No one knew that this woman once had another life, a past none of them could ever imagine. And no one knew that within a single night, the name Martha Johnson would shake the entire Sterling Foods empire. The only question left was, who was this lunch lady, and how did she become the CEO of a billion-dollar corporation? Before becoming the lunch lady of Sterling Foods, Martha Johnson had been a professional chef, working at some of the finest restaurants in Manhattan. Her hands were graceful and precise, often praised as those of a woman who cooks with her heart. But life never follows a recipe. Her husband, Elliot Johnson, a financial advisor for a major corporation, died in a car accident when Martha had just turned 45. His death took away not only her partner but also the stability her small family once had. 2 children still in school, stacks of unpaid bills, and a black woman starting over in a city that was never easy. Martha applied for a job in the cafeteria of Sterling Foods Corporation, a massive food conglomerate known to every American household as a symbol of quality and success. Each morning, she arrived earlier than everyone else, brewed coffee, arranged trays of meals, and left only when the office lights were out. She spoke little, was always punctual, and always listened. Yet inside that narrow kitchen, she learned more than any business school could ever teach. To the executives, Martha was just a shadow. No one knew her name. No one asked where she lived or what she dreamed of. They only saw the apron, the silver strands of hair, and the wrinkled hands. What they did not see was her extraordinary memory, her meticulous attention to detail, and the gaze of a woman who had known enough pain to understand that power does not always sit at the conference table. The company was led by Richard Hale, a polished, confident white CEO who always appeared in press conferences with a model-perfect smile. He spoke about growth, profit, and a bright future. But behind closed doors, hundreds of workers were laid off, benefits were slashed, and fear quietly spread through every department. In the cafeteria, as expensive suits passed by, Martha overheard fragments of conversations that seemed casual but carried heavy meaning. "The stock price is about to move. Let the internal auditors handle it. They've already been persuaded. If we cut more staff, next quarter's profit margin will look a lot better." Each word seared into her mind like drops of hot oil hitting a pan. Martha realized something deeply wrong was happening in the very place where she cooked every day. But she did not speak up, not because she was afraid, because it was not time yet. It was a late Friday evening. The cafeteria lights were off, but Martha stayed behind to finish cleaning. Outside, the last employees left, and the glass doors closed with a soft echo, leaving behind a long silence. Under one of the tables, she found a wallet dropped by someone from the accounting department. She picked it up, brushed off the dust, and walked toward the office to return it. The accounting room door was slightly open, a desk lamp still glowing. On the desk lay unfinished files, and for a brief moment, Martha saw numbers she recognized. Payroll sheets, internal transaction records, tax reports. But something did not add up. Repeated figures, vague charity expenses, and enormous bonuses for the executive board during the loss-making quarter. She told no one. She simply folded the papers back and walked out. But in her mind, every number was memorized. From that day on, Martha began to watch more closely. She photographed forgotten invoices, noted shipment times, and uncovered a web of shady expenses. Fake suppliers, charity funds funneled into shell companies. The deeper she dug, the clearer it became. This was not just sloppy accounting. It was an elaborate scheme to manipulate the company's stock. Martha knew she needed help. She called James Porter, an old friend, a former auditor who had quit after blowing the whistle on corruption at another firm. Now, he worked as a lawyer defending corporate whistleblowers. They met at a small coffee shop in Harlem. James looked at the woman in the worn-out apron sitting across from him, stayed silent for a moment, then said, "Martha, are you sure you want to go down this road? Once you start, there is no turning back." She simply replied, "I have spent my whole life in the kitchen, James. Now I want to see who's cooking upstairs." From that day on, the two began collecting data, every invoice, every internal email, every recorded conversation. James analyzed, Martha gathered. Piece by piece, they built the full picture, a plan to dump insider shares for personal gain before announcing a manufactured crisis. But Martha still did not act. She knew one truth better than anyone in a game of power. Precision and patience are the only real weapons. It was Wednesday noon, and the cafeteria was as crowded as always. The sound of forks and knives clinking against trays mixed with the chatter of employees. Martha quietly ladled soup, wiped the tables, moving as if nothing in the world had changed, until a group of executives walked in and took a seat near the serving counter. They spoke in low voices, but for someone who had lived her whole life in silence like Martha, every word was perfectly clear. "We need to cut another 200 employees in Atlanta, otherwise, the dividends will drop." Another man let out a mocking laugh. "They can find other jobs. Who cares about those black workers at the factory anyway?" The ladle in Martha's hand froze midair. The sound of soup dripping into the tray felt strangely heavy. A chill ran down her spine. She remembered Evelyn, her cousin who had worked at the Atlanta branch, the one who was laid off in a so-called cost reduction. Only now did Martha realize it was never an economic decision. It was a game, one built on profit and contempt. That night, in her small apartment, Martha sat in front of her old laptop. The blue light reflected on her wrinkled face, but her eyes were glowing, bright and steady, like the only lamp in the dark. She opened every file, every note, every photo she had collected over the past few months. On the screen, the chaotic numbers slowly came together into one picture: fraud, manipulation, and deceit. She began to write, slowly, line by line, as if she were cooking a dish that required every ingredient to be exact. It was an internal whistleblower report. She sent the draft to James, and together they built a plan. First, they would present all the evidence to the board of directors, the only place where truth could save the company. Second, they would trigger the emergency transfer clause of the proxy shares her husband had left behind. In a box of old files, Martha found the contract Elliot once signed. He had been a financial advisor for Sterling Foods and had quietly held 18% of the company's shares, which he had legally transferred to his wife in the event of his death. She had forgotten about it, or perhaps never believed she would need it. But now, everything was different. When her eyes reached the line, legal heir, Martha L. Johnson, her hands trembled, not from ambition, but from the realization that every moment of endurance, every silence, had led to this very point. With those shares, she became the second largest shareholder, just after CEO Richard Hale himself. A cook, a black woman whom the entire company had dismissed, now held the legal power to remove him from his throne. Martha did not run to the press. She did not shout. She did not make public accusations. She chose the way she always believed in, quiet, but precise. On the day she sent the report, she signed her name in blue ink. Right beneath the title, Internal whistleblower report, Sterling Foods Corporation. No one in the company knew that in just a few days, the name Martha Johnson would become an earthquake. An earthquake that began in the cafeteria downstairs. The day of the shareholders' meeting arrived. The atmosphere inside Sterling Foods headquarters was suffocatingly tense. The grand lobby gleamed under bright lights. Men in expensive suits exchanged firm handshakes, while lower-level employees stood quietly at a distance, watching. On stage, Richard Hale, the confident and powerful CEO, spoke with his usual self-satisfied tone. Ladies and gentlemen, Sterling Foods continues to lead the market. This quarter's profit has increased by 12%, and we are entering a new era of sustainable growth. Applause filled the room. Everything unfolded as it always did, until the back door quietly opened. A woman walked in, a crisp white shirt, an apron neatly folded in her hand. No one paid attention until she walked straight to the front and placed a thick folder on the table. Her voice was calm, yet it carried across the room. "Mr. Hale, I believe you have forgotten one shareholder." The entire room went silent. Hale frowned, his smile fading. "Martha, what are you doing here? This is a closed meeting." But she had already opened the folder. Each turn of the page echoed like the ticking of a clock. Her voice remained steady, deliberate, and firm. "This is the record of illegal expenditures made by the executive board. These are the unauthorized insider transactions. And this is the legal share certificate my late husband, Elliot Johnson, left behind, representing 18% ownership of Sterling Foods." A wave of murmurs swept through the room. Several board members exchanged stunned looks. Hale's face turned red. He tried to cut her off. "This is absurd. A kitchen worker thinks she can." Martha lifted her head and looked him straight in the eyes. Her voice was not loud, but it carried a weight that silenced the entire room. "You have built your power on the sweat of people you call invisible. Today, they will be heard." The air grew heavy. A board member stood up and called for an emergency vote. Each piece of evidence was examined and verified against the accounting data. Everything matched, too perfectly to deny. The vote ended within 20 minutes. The result: Richard Hale was immediately dismissed and placed under investigation for financial fraud. The interim CEO, by rights of the second largest shareholder, was appointed, Martha L. Johnson. When the announcement was read aloud, the entire room fell silent. Those who once mocked her, the same eyes that once looked down on her, now held nothing but shock and respect. Martha said nothing more. She simply bowed her head, adjusted the apron in her hand, and looked up at the large screen where her name now appeared. A faint smile, not of victory, but of justice finally served. Downstairs, the cafeteria was unusually quiet that day. The employees whispered to one another, "The lunch lady is now the CEO." After that day, Martha never sought the spotlight. She turned down interviews and told reporters only one sentence: "I am not here for revenge. I am here so people can be seen." In the following months, she founded the Fair Hands Fund, a foundation supporting low-level employees and those who had been unfairly laid off. She also created weekly, open talk sessions, where everyone, from security guards and janitors to senior executives, could speak equally. She said, "There is no such thing as a lowly job. There are only people who have not yet been heard." One morning, the young employee who once mocked her approached, her eyes uncertain. "Miss Martha, I was wrong about you." Martha smiled softly and replied, "It is all right. What matters is that you see me now and that you see yourself." In the final scene, Martha walked out of Sterling Foods headquarters. The morning sunlight reflected off the glass doors, showing the image of a woman once dismissed, now standing tall, calm, and free. The narrator's voice rose. "Never judge someone by the apron they wear. Because sometimes, the one you think is the smallest is the one who changes everything."